Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few days ago at the Trenton Art All Night Festival, a fight between two individuals resulted in a mass shooting. 17 people shot, at least one critically injured. Fortunately, the only fatality I should say, was one of the shooters. Even so, nearly 20 people shot at a community festival dedicated to breathing new life into the city and bringing the community together around something that is positive deserves our attention. Unfortunately, we've had a bad habit of assigning sympathy and coverage only to certain kinds of shootings. In fact, it's safe to say that there are some who believe that there are communities in which gun violence will always be an unavoidable norm. That is false. That is a horrible and destructive stereotype that ignores the underpinning of our conversation about guns. From access to excessively destructive accessories, guns are the problem. NRA advocates would argue that in Parkland, the shooter got his gun legally. But should an 18-year-old be able to buy a gun? Especially when that gun is never going to be used for sport. Those same advocates would argue that most shootings in urban areas occur with illegally obtained weapons, and that no regulation would prevent them. But because we refuse registries to require them, we don't know where these guns come from. Perhaps if we did, perhaps if we knew who the first buyer was and which states those illegal weapons came from, they wouldn't end up in the wrong hands. Mr. Speaker, our country's gun problem isn't a single-sided one. It is multifaceted and will require more than just one angle to solve. Fortunately, from members of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force alone, there are more than 70 proposals that seek to address this singular and deadly crisis. I'm responsible for 2 of them: the Stop Online Ammunition Sales of 2017 to flag for law enforcement large bullet and ammunition purchases that suggest the kind of stockpiling that precedes an attack, and the Handgun Licensing and Registration Bill, which would create the kind of registry that might help us keep more weapons out of the wrong hands. Earlier this week, I wrote a letter to you, Mr. Speaker, asking for consideration of any one of these 70 bills in honor of the victims of Sunday's shooting. I have yet to receive a response to my request, and with the paralyzing fear that seems to grip my Republican colleagues whenever we mention guns, I don't have high hopes that I will get one. But I do know that the longer we continue to ignore this problem, the more people will be hurt and the more lives will be lost. At work, at school, at the grocery store, at the playground, in the homes with violent partners, by accident during play dates, at the hands of those suffering from mental illness, with or without law enforcement being present. Whether or not someone in the audience or classroom is armed, guns have always been the problem. We need to accept that so that we can get to work on it and move on it. I continue to pray for the health and recovery of those who are injured in Trenton as well as in other places, just as I will continue to work on this issue. Thank you for the time, and I yield back.